and commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary.
My name is Timothy Killins. I'm a case manager at Westlake Middle School, and I'm here because they're closing down schools in black and brown neighborhoods, and we want the community to have the school. So we asked them, we went on strike, we packed their board meetings. We've tried everything to try to get them to reverse their decision, so I feel like this is the most militant action we done took so far, and I'm here for it. I definitely think that it's institutionalized racism. I think that it's a intensification of gentrification, and yeah, we know it's racism, and that's why we're fighting back. And like I said, this school was 58% black. This school was almost 60% black, 30% Latino, and almost every school that you look at, you can look at this poster right here, it's going on around the whole country, where it's attacks on our communities, but we're here for the fight.
And what can people do who want to support this?
We definitely need security at nighttime. You could get on a text list that you can, if the police come, try to remove people for trespassing. We need we need numbers to come out here. You also can donate food. Just show up. We need bodies.
So this is a labor community effort?
It's parents, community, teachers, labor. Yeah, it's the whole Oakland community.
And what does this have to do with the Port of Oakland, the longshoremen?
The Port of Oakland, this school, when they close schools down, they usually tend to sell them to developers or give long-term leases to charter schools, which is putting public money in private hands. The longshoremen are going through the same thing at their port, where we have a billionaire named John Fisher who is trying to build an A's stadium on Howard Terminal, but the A Stadium is just $1 billion. It's a $12 billion deal, so it's really just a real estate grab, you know, under the guise that is a baseball stadium. So I suggest people really just look into that, oppose the Howard Terminal, and so we could keep the port for the port and keep those jobs for Oaklanders.
And what do you think about the fact that the city council, Oakland City Council, wants to spend $850 million in the state in tax subsidies to John Fisher's students?
Yeah, so that's what privatizers do. They try to get as much public money as they can. Just like if a charter school comes here, they will be getting public money every head they enroll. So that's the new wave. It's been a wave, is where billionaires, they try to get their hands on the public funds. And so the city trying to spend almost $1 billion to build that stadium is not no surprise. I don't want to pay it. I don't think any taxpayers want to pay it.
My name is Gregoiro Gutierrez. I am a teacher in Oakland Unified School District. I teach over at Westlake Middle School. I teach history for 6th and 7th grade. So that's world history, ancient world history, and medieval world history. So did you want me to talk?
Yeah, and talk about, you know, what's going on, how you've gotten involved, and your fight to keep the schools open.
Okay, so how did I get involved in this particular fight? So what happened was in late January, a person by the name of Mike Hutchison, who's a school board member, had announced on their Facebook page that there was a list to close 16 schools in OUSD, Oakland Unified School District, OUSD. And one of the schools on that list was Westlake Middle School, which is a school that I was a teacher at. And so what happened was that announcement became official the following week when it was announced by the actual school board. And so that really kicked off a large fight for basically people in those 16 schools to try to mobilize and try to fight back. And so really what happened was many people were doing things individually, including Westlake, and it didn't seem as though any other institutions or entities were trying to bring people together to fight against this issue.
What about the union?
So that's a great question. That's one of the institutions or organizations that my personal opinion is that OEA, the union, was not doing anything, right? Like, they didn't have a plan. Like when they showed up to my school, because they, you know, the leadership did show. When I say leadership, I mean president, vice president number 2, those kind of people. They did indeed show up to my school site, but they didn't say, hey, this is how we want to assist you. They just said, hey, I'm here to support, but they never said, this is what support looks like, this is what support means. And I was in a state of shock, so I didn't ask, what does your support mean, what does it look like? And what it really felt like was silence and inaction. And so a lot of the teachers and staff members at Westlake, and honestly at other schools like La Escuelita, and Met West. Those three schools really kicked it off at the very beginning. We did some, we had hunger strikers at our school. So the community school manager, CSM, Mr. Omalade, Moses Omalade, and a teacher, Mix Andre Sachet from Westlake, both did a hunger strike. And so that kicked off a series of events at Westlake. A man named Timothy Killins helped assist with organizing many of the events. I was the rep over at Westlake, so I also helped assist with organizing events, and those events came to be the two walkouts that we did, a pamphleting campaign in front of the school, other things that we did, just at that site. Concurrently, when we did our first walkout, La Escuelita heard that we were doing that walkout, and they met us at the district office at 10,000 Broadway, as did Met West, because Met West is connected to both campus. They have a Met West campus at the middle school that I work at Westlake, and they have a Met West campus at La Escuelita. So those three schools, Westlake, Met West, and La Escuelita, showed up big time on that first walkout, which was February, I can't remember exactly, it was February something, and we all walked down to the City Hall and then the Broadway. We had a big protest, and then we marched over to WAMS. We did, the Westlake people, to let them know, hey, we're asking for your support as well. We don't mean you any harm. We hope you don't mean us any harm. And then we marched back to Westlake, because the plan was to merge Westlake with West Oakland Middle School, and then after 1 year, then consolidate and become one school. So we went over to WAMS to let WAMS know, we want your support. We want our school. We know you want your school. We hope to keep our schools, right? You have your school. We have our school.
A unified fight.
A unified fight. And WAMS showed up. WAMS was there. They greeted us when we showed up. And then at the very next time that we did a march, the rep from WAMS, who's a teacher there, brought her 8th graders over to meet us at the City Hall. And so that was our second walkout. So we had a lot of these events. In between there were a lot of teachers doing sick outs on their own, but nothing was organized by the union. The union didn't organize any actions, none. And after those events, and after February 8th, which is when the official vote happened, and they voted to take Westlake off the list, but they kept a total of about 11 schools on there. They closed 3 this year. Technically, they closed those schools as of Wednesday, but as you can see, we're here occupying Parker. They also closed Community Day, which is up in the hills, and they truncated grades 6th, 7th, and 8th at La Escuelita. 2 other schools got merged. Those 2 schools, the stakeholders there said that was actually good for their school, so we didn't say anything, because the issue really is responsiveness to the community. If that community thought that a merger was in their best interest, then we support that community doing what's in their best interest. But this community, Parker, has said that closing this school is not in the community's best interest or the students' best interest, and we're here to stand with them. So that's how I got in the fight, was because they tried to close my school. And so we stood up. Now, after we stood up, Parker was like the 4th school to really stand up and do a lot, as did Tech and as did Oakland High. All those schools I just named had major actions that they took part in. They held town halls, things like that. Other schools as well came to aid as well. They held town halls at other schools. So for instance, Dewey held a teach-in. Markham held 2 town halls. Other schools had events that were feeding into the larger event of no school closures. So that's how I got onto no school closures. That then led me into this concept called privatization, right? And the basic concept of privatization is that you're going to take things that already belong to the public, whether it's a national park or a state park or a school, and you're going to then give it to an individual, a private citizen or a private entity, a corporation, as we know. Since Citizen United, corporations are considered citizens. So the bottom line is privatization is when they take public resources, including land, and they give it to private citizens or groups of citizens for their use, right? And as we know, when things leave the public sector, public venue, they don't come back. And if they do, they come back at a much higher price. So it's important that we hold on to these schools, right? The conversation, the narrative has never shifted, and it needs to shift. We have too many schools. If you're right, that might be true, but your information is incorrect. The problem is, in the state of California, we have not centered student learning. And if we centered student learning, we would know that we shouldn't have 30 or 32 kids per teacher. We should have 25 or less, and probably 20 or less for grades 5, K through 5 should be 20 or less. Grades 6 through 12 should be 25 or less, right? If we did that, if we held to that, we don't have enough schools. Right, that's the fact. So if you're serious about student education and having outcomes that are equitable, right, and truly investing equity into the system and having equity outcomes, we don't have enough schools. That narrative of we have too many schools only fits the narrative of privatization, charterization, taking power and resources from the people, and not doing what's right for and by the students. That's when that narrative makes sense. And so I came to that understanding through this fight, because I came to the understanding that what's happening right now is charterization. And charterization is one form of privatization, right? I didn't make all those connections prior to this fight. And when I made that connection, what happened was we went and talked with some of the people that were down at the port, because the port is facing the same fight we're fighting. The fact is that the people that are in power right now are attempting to give a big portion of the port, I'm talking about the Oakland port, the Port of Oakland, to a private entity. In this case, we're mainly talking about the Fisher family, but the Fisher family is just the face of privatization in Oakland. If you go to a different city, it's probably a different family. But the point is, it's not the people, it's an individual or a group of citizens, which means corporations as well. And what we realize is that the same fight that the longshoremen are having is the same fight that teachers, parents, and students are having. It's literally the same fight, and in this case, against some of the same people. And the problem is the people that we've elected, the people that we have vested our power in, right, through our representative democracy, through our republic, the people that we vested our power in have now taken that power of the people and have done what they wanted to do and not what they've been given a mandate to do. And that's the problem. And that's how I got involved in this fight. And that's how I made the connections from the shutting down this one school that I was at was connected to shutting down all these schools, which is connected to charterization, which is connected to privatization, which is connected to the port. And it's not just about the port and just about the schools. It's about any time that private citizens are trying to get a cut rate price or for free public property, the property that belongs to people, that our tax dollars as a collective have purchased and maintained. And that, I mean, just thinking critically, that doesn't make sense. And it should make sense. And then to go back to the narrative should be, what are we doing to advocate and promote quality learning? Quality learning, one of the off top of the number one things you could do is lower class sizes. We know from various research from the past 30, 40 years that smaller class sizes lead to higher outcomes, better outcomes for students.
And the billionaires have their kids in classes with 20, 15 students.
You ain't lying, right? When you go to private schools, one of the reasons why these private schools are successful is because they cap their classes at 20 or 25. They know what works and what doesn't work, and they maintain a system that works. So I'm not trying to say like all these schools got to be ran like private schools. What I'm saying is these schools can be ran better. I agree with that. But they're not going to be ran better by cutting schools. They're going to be ran better by systematically changing the system and investing more in these schools. We invest where our priorities are. That's true of every household. If you go home and you got to make a decision if you're going to keep the water on and the lights on, you're going to keep on whatever you think is the most highest priority. Maybe it's the water, maybe it's the lights. For you to decide in your home if that's the situation you're in. Now, if that's not your situation, you're still prioritizing, and you're prioritizing by spending money where your priorities are. As a state, in the state of California, we need to reprioritize education.
We have a $100 billion surplus.
Yeah, $100 billion surplus.
What does the politicians say in Oakland about it? Skinner, Bonta, there are Democrats who are in the legislature.
That's a great question. So I think that the bigger question is, let's go back about 20 years and look to when the state of California passed a measure to cap class size at 20. Whatever happened with that? Right? We passed that as voters, and I have no idea what has happened since, but I can tell you what hasn't happened is they haven't capped class sizes. Let's go back to the argument about, hey, let's have pre-K, they're going to have preschool, kindergarten, mandatory and paid for by the state of California. That was the Democrats' push for that in the early 2000s, and it failed. And now we have the Democrats control both houses of the state legislature and the governorship, and these things are not getting done. So this issue is not an issue of Republican or Democrat, and people need to wake up to that issue. The Democrats do not do what is in our best interest. If you're a working class person, if you're a person living in poverty, and to be clear, just to be clear with people, that's going to be 80% of the humans that live in California. You're either working class or you're in poverty. The problem is that the boot of oppression has been gently lifted off your neck, and now you think you're middle class because you're not living paycheck to paycheck. But you don't own a home, you don't own a boat, you don't have time to spend with your quality of life with your family because you're busy grinding, not working but grinding. And that system is not working for the majority of us. And although you as an individual, I'm talking to any individual in California, might think, oh, well, I feel secure. That's great, but you are not middle class. And you need to wake up to the struggle and realize that you're working class. And for those people that aren't working class, they're more than likely in poverty. They're impoverished, and that's part of the system. So going back to what you're asking, I have no faith in our current state legislature, our current Democratic, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party in California for that matter, either party. They have not been representing the interests of the people, and that shows because over a 20-year span, you can see how their platform was here when Republicans were still a threat, and now their platform is to no longer care about education, right? They can do it if they wanted to do it. So that $100 billion surplus, I don't think we're going to see that unless we, the people, put the pressure on these people. And that means not re-electing incumbents, making public demands of these people that they invest systematically into education.
And Tony Thurmond, State Superintendent of Public Instruction, he was sent a letter by the Board of Education to reject the demands for closures. He rejected it. What does that say about Tony Thurmond, who the unions are supporting?
Yeah, so that's a big problem, right? So there's this concept called, there's different types of names of it. You might call it corporate unionization or business unionization or company unions. I think that the reality is that what we see is the Republican Party, the Democratic Party are both anti-union because unions mean share power. But the tactics the Republican Party uses is to bust unions, demonize unions, and they've been successful in some states. The tactic that the Democratic Party has used has been to co-opt and infiltrate unions and to bring them around to whatever the party line is, right? That's what I'm seeing. That's my opinion based on what I see. I'm a critical thinker. I can make observations in my world, and I can make, deductions and inductions based on what I see and know and experience. And I think that what I would ask any voter or any citizen in California, any person living in California, is that you do the same. Actually take the 30 minutes to look into the word privatization, look into what's going on with the Democratic Party here in California, and ask yourself, what are your interests? And then ask yourself, where's your share of the American pie? Because what we've been told for a long time is that the American pie is this big and it's already been doled out and there's nothing left. That's not true. What's happened is private interests, meaning not you, not me, not the citizens, have a majority share of that American pie. And they have not worked for it, they have not earned it, and they have not built it, but they're taking it. And we need to wake up to that. So going back to Thurmond, what I'm saying is anybody that's pressing the line of, oh, we got to just do it the way we want to do it, but your way doesn't include input. So you're telling me that you know what's best for my community and you don't live in my community. That doesn't make sense, and that's not how democracy is supposed to work. That's not why we elect our representatives. My representative needs to represent my interests in my district. And my district might be different than another district, and that's totally okay. And so what I'm saying about Tony Thurmond is I do not see him as a person that is progressive, and I do not see him as a person that is in support of education. I see him as the person that's sitting in the position and holding that position of power and doing whatever he thinks is best for himself or for the people that he works for, but he does not work for the people.
Do you think there should be a labor party, a working class party?
That's a good question. I mean, technically there already are some labor parties, at the national level and whatnot. And I think that the problem with the word labor party, I do think there's a problem, which is people like to throw these following words around. They like to throw around communism, socialism, and labor party. And people have conflated all those things to mean the same thing. I am not a communist, right? I just want to put that out to anybody listening. I actually catch a lot of flack from people because I call myself liberal. When you're liberal, it means that you understand that there's this concept called capitalism. What I'm saying is we need to acknowledge that in our society there's no such thing as pure capitalism or pure socialism. As a matter of fact, I've never called the fire department, but I pay my taxes towards universal file care.
But if the Democrats are controlled by the corporations and the billionaires, shouldn't the working class and the unions have their own political party?
I do think that working class people and unions should have their own political parties, and I think, to be quite frank, if we really want to get the issue, we need campaign finance reform, because campaign finance reform would really bring to heel a lot of the issues that we're having with whatever parties are out there. That's my opinion. The reason for that is simple. Right now, each dollar that you can donate acts as a megaphone. So even though we all have one voice for one person, we don't all have the same megaphone. If I can only give $100, but you can give $100 billion, your megaphone's bigger, which means people are going to hear you more clearly. And that's how money acts in our system. So I think above all else, we need campaign finance reform. Once we do that, I think we'll be able to have a labor party.
Well, the CTA has a lot of money.
The CTA has a lot of money that they've extorted from the locals, right? 80% of the money that is generated from my union, OEA, goes to CTA and NEA.
What's it for?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you. What it sounds like it's for is part of it is for legal counsel. The problem with that is CTA has legal counsel, and they only lend out that legal counsel if they think it's something they want to fight for. That means that at the local, we don't have local control of our own money that we pay in as dues. That's a problem, because if we had our own legal counsel that we paid for, then that legal counsel could be utilized to fight the fights that we think are a priority here in our district for us, including these school closures. So we are at the behest of CTA. That's why I say it feels like, my opinion is that they extort us, because if we don't pay dues, then they threaten to kick us out and not provide any type of mutual aid, right?
And also, other districts, school districts, are facing the same thing as Oakland.
Yeah.
San Francisco, West Contra Costa. Why hasn't the union, the CTA, brought all these districts together towards a statewide action of all the same districts facing the same attacks?
That's a good question, and I see that as a macro in terms of the micro. So here at the district level in OUSD, our umbrella is OEA. They didn't do that either. They didn't bring the schools together. So I go up to the state level. It would make sense to me that CTA would bring all the locals together and say, y'all need to have a unified front, especially if you're on the Bay Area. Maybe make one coalition in the Bay, one in the Central Valley, one in Southern California, because everybody in State California is affected. They haven't done that. Now, why is that? Because people that are organized then what? They mobilize. When they mobilize, they fight, they take action, they can actually get what they need and get what they want. So CTA has basically said we're the de facto voice for all the teachers, right? Which is not a good thing. They have a monopoly on that. And we know that in general, monopolies are a bad thing. So I couldn't tell you the real reason why it hasn't happened, but I could speculate and say that it looks like the people in OEA want to retain control of OEA. The people in CTA want to retain control of CTA and all the locals. So it seems to me to be about power and not about people.
Well, it seems like even in the Bay Area, San Francisco faces the same attack with FICMAT, West Contra Costa. These unions, these CTA locals, could have a united action.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like the leadership of these unions are saying, let's unite with all the people who are facing the same attacks from these agencies.
That's definitely what it seems like to me. It seems like the leadership of our particular union, OEA, is not reaching out to other unions in terms of creating a united front. And we're in the same career field, right? We're talking about teachers or educators in general. And clearly that leadership is not being provided by CTA, which is the state, the state agency, right? So, like I said, I can only speculate as to motives, but what I can tell you is they're taking our money and we don't seem to be getting our needs met. And that doesn't seem like a fair relationship.
And SLAP, what do you think about SLAP?
So I actually, full disclosure, I actually joined SLAP as an upset teacher. So SLAP stands for Schools and Labor Against Privatization. And I think that SLAP is a model that addresses some of the questions that you just asked. I think that SLAP looks like it's this model that has the potential to unite multiple locals to fight against these issues like FICMAT. For those that don't know, FICMAT is basically the state agency, the state's way of asserting control on schools. CTA is the labor way of asserting control on schools. And so those two arms seem to be working in tandem, right? It seems that way to me. Now, I think SLAP is great because that offers the potential of a united front against FICMAT, against state, in favor of not just the teachers. It's not about the teachers because our material conditions are the material conditions of students as well, right? But also about the fact that, like, for instance, OEA, through the membership, was able to initiate a one-day unfair labor practice strike on April 29th. That came from the membership and the community. Now, the issue is that Oakland engaged in some unfair labor practices. Teachers were upset about that. The leadership didn't seem, in my opinion, to be too keen on doing anything about it. Because what a lot of people don't know is that April 29th vote for that strike was the second time we pushed a vote through to try to get a strike happening against these school closures. It took 2 attempts. And the first attempt was stalled out, in my opinion, by the OEA leadership, meaning the president, vice president 1, vice president 2, as well as the executive board. So that's my...
Why would they stall it?
That's a great question. That's the question. I don't know people's motives. I don't know what's inside their head. And to be frank with you, they're not sharing what their motives and what's inside their head. They don't share, hey, here's the strategy of OEA. I'm not privy to what OEA's strategy is, even though I'm a dues-paying member. I'm only privy to what does and doesn't happen. And I'm a rep that sits on rep council. So that to me is concerning. It doesn't seem transparent. It doesn't seem open. I can speculate. And what I would speculate is that they being the leadership, seems to be promoting what they call harmonious labor relations. And that's a great word, right? Like these words collaborate, harmonious labor relations, they sound positive, and I think they are positive. However, in practice, they're not. Harmonious labor relations means that the people that represent the teachers, our union, they want to be friendly with the people that represent the district, but our interests are not always aligned. Many times they go counter, many times they're actually competing for resources or things. And if we're having harmonious labor relations, who's getting the collaboration? Does that mean that OEA is collaborating with OUSD at the expense of OEA members? Because that's what it feels like. And if that's what harmonious labor relations are, I don't want that. I would rather have whatever the other option is. And so that's what it feels like. That's what it looks like to me as a rank and file member, as a person in the trenches teaching every day, those kind of things. That's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. And I don't want to get into all the ins and outs of that, but that's what it really looks like to me. So back to SLAP. I like SLAP. I think SLAP is a model that hopefully can be replicated in different geographical locations. And I also hope that people hear the call and we can get more more educator unions involved in it, because our fight is their fight. It's the same fight. And it's
public workers are outsourcing public work. Nonprofits are being used in public jobs to take away public jobs.
Yeah, we actually see that. We also see things like, in my opinion, the term would be internal colonization. We see the destabilization of a district like Oakland Unified School District. The open secret, for instance, in education is, if you were to go to what is called a good school district, you're going to quickly realize that good school districts never hire first-year teachers. They only hire teachers that have 3 to 5 years plus experience. Well, where do teachers go to get their first 3 to 5 years experience? Just districts like OUSD. So this school district, in my opinion, is being used to train teachers for other people's children, not for these children. And one of the main drivers of that, in my opinion, is a program that is touted by the Democratic Party, Teach for America. Because these TFA teachers come in here and they consistently cross picket lines. They consistently bend to the will of principals at the site. They consistently do not support union actions, and when they do, they're delayed, they're late to the game. And they have the shield of, well, I won't get the things that I need from this program if I do these things. You're probably right. But we, the teachers that are not in TFA, also won't get the things that we need if we don't strike. We won't get the things that our community needs if we don't strike. The April 29th strike was a big one because that was really a solidarity action with the community and the educators. In the past, in 2019, the teachers asked the community to be in solidarity, and the community stepped up and said yes. This year, the teachers were upset, our union wasn't doing anything, and the community was demanding that teachers step up for the community because it was within our rights to, and step up on their behalf. And quite frankly, as an individual, I don't see how we could not step up on our own behalf and on behalf of our community. And then next year, when we're gonna go into another contract bargaining agreement year, which is next year, to then ask them for support again. I just don't see how that would make sense. And so I think the reason why this April 29th strike was such a big deal was because it showed that teachers are willing to do more than just strike for pay. And that our struggle is your struggle, it's a shared struggle. We are also members of this community, and we understand the value, the intrinsic value of education and its impact on people's lives. And I think that that was a powerful message because it sent a message to not just this community, but every community in America that teachers do care, and that they will stand up and fight for their communities.
Teachers are under attack nationally.
Yep.
You're having these massacres. They want to arm teachers, supposedly with guns. They won't give them enough supplies, so they have to spend their own money for supplies, but they want to give them guns. What the hell's going on in this country?
Well, I can tell you that guns and bullets are expensive. I'm a veteran. I was in the United States Marine Corps. I did one tour of duty in Iraq. And so what I can tell you is that arming teachers doesn't make sense. Teachers do not have a culture of security, which means they don't have a culture of weapons handling, weapons maintenance. And what I'm here to tell you is I was in the United States Marine Corps. When I went to Iraq, which was a combat zone, people, not just Marines, but Army, Navy, every group, people left their weapons in the bathroom, in the cafeteria, right? So what I'm telling you is if these people who are trained to handle their firearms and need their firearms to protect their lives in like not in a theoretical, but in an everyday situation, if these folks are not able to maintain positive control of their weapons on a day-to-day, what makes you think that 5 days a week over the course of a year that not a single teacher who is potentially given a firearm is either going to leave it at home by accident, leave it in the bathroom by accident, leave it in their desk by accident, right? And then what happens if a student gets a hold of that potentially government-issued weapon, right? I actually asked my students, because this issue, unfortunately, let's keep it real, there are mass shootings every year with the exception of the pandemic year when we were online. There were school shootings every year that I've been teaching. And so we talk about in middle school the central question of government, right? And like, what are the laws? And I teach the children, there's always going to be a line, and it's up to whatever generation is in power to determine where that line is, right? In terms of things. So the issue came up about gun rights. And so I was really shocked my first year of teaching where many of the 7th graders, more or less their opinion is that people should be allowed to buy guns until they're 28. And I was like, wow, I thought that they might think lower. But what occurred to me is that many of these students have actually witnessed or experienced a loss in their family group or friend group as a result of gun violence. And to be frank about it, they don't have to know the actual research behind it, no statistics. They know that it was some kid with a 16 or 20-year-old or 23-year-old kid that had the gun and shot someone, right? And so what does the statistics show? The statistics show that males, aged 16 to 24 commit 90% of the violent crime, including murders. And so when I hear these kids, what I realize is they understand that intrinsically and with just by observation, right? We're all critical thinkers. They looked at the situation and realized, the people that are shooting up the block, the people that are shooting the people I know are people that are young. And so in their minds, what they're thinking, I'm speculating here, is let's push the age up, and hopefully that alone will do something. Now, I don't know what the solution is to gun control. I'm not trying to...
it sounds like it's a business, profiteering.
It does sound like it's profiteering, yeah.
And people make money off of sales of
guns.
guns.
I also think, and that would be another potential to make money is by arming teachers. But what I'm saying is it's not a good idea to arm teachers because my experience in the Marine Corps is these are the 3 things that happen. People did not maintain positive control of their weapons at all times. That's a bigger problem when you're in a school environment. People committed suicide with the very weapons they were given in Iraq, right? People for whatever reason, whether it was on purpose or on accident, engaged in what they call green on green, which means like fratricide, either because there was confusion of communication and people were shooting and there were people in the middle, or because in some cases, like when I was in Iraq, there was a gentleman who was in the Army who threw a grenade in a tent and then, had his M16 and was, mowing people down as they came running out. So what I'm saying is, if we put more guns in more hands, just from a statistical standpoint, there's going to be more shootings. That's just how math works. So I don't think that putting more guns in more hands in the terms of teachers makes sense. Because just because someone's a teacher doesn't mean that they're prepared to use that weapon in a way that makes sense. And it really sounds more like what you said, like a profit scheme, which is who's going to get the contract. You see what I'm saying? If the state decides as a state that they're going to issue weapons to teachers, that means there's going to be a state contract for those weapons. You see what I'm saying? And I'm sure there'll be a state contract for training. But what I'm telling you is that if trained professionals in the military have problems with firearms, what are the odds that teachers are going to get some kind of 2-week training and then be ready? Probably not. And I asked the students the same question when we had that gun debate, not really a gun debate, but just a question about what do you think about firearms and that. And when I say, well, because it always comes up every year, should teachers be armed? And usually the kids are like, yeah. And I go, okay, well, let's start to add some facts. I say, in this classroom, think about every teacher that you have or have had your whole life. Have any of those teachers maybe acted angry or yelled at you? Yeah. Now think of the teacher you think is the worst teacher. Do you want to give that teacher a gun? And usually the vote then shifts the other way, right? Because they also start to realize, maybe not, because all humans are emotional and all humans make mistakes, right? So I just don't think it's a good idea to arm teachers for numerous reasons. Not just I'm sure the talking point is they're going to stop school shootings. When we put law enforcement officers in schools, and not a single law enforcement officer has ever stopped or prevented a school shooting on a campus as it was beginning or once it began. We know that. So why would arming teachers be any different? You see what I'm saying? It just doesn't add up. And law enforcement professionals are trained, like that's their career, and they're having trouble doing it. Why are we not going to give this other people? If my job is to teach, now my job is also to provide security. Right? How many jobs do I have to have before I start to degrade my skill set? You see what I'm saying? I just don't think it's a good idea to arm teachers. I myself personally own firearms. I'm not against, gun ownership. I am against guns being on a school campus. I don't think that makes any sense. I don't think it makes even sense to have law enforcement on campus, because what we've noticed when we put law enforcement on campuses is we've increased incarceration rates, prison to pipeline rates. We have not decreased school shootings. So that it doesn't make sense to me at all.